What's up, folks, and welcome to Indie Ramble. So, this is going to be an interesting one that I have to talk to you guys about today for several reasons. It is a prequel to a game in a completely different genre from over 20 years ago that very few people played even back in the day. And well, it's something that I'm personally very conflicted on, but that I think a lot of people are actually going to quite enjoy. And that's why I wanted to show it to you. It's going to be for a pretty interesting ramble, I think. So this is Slave Zero X. And what it actually is a prequel to a game, as I said, from 1999 that came out for the PC and Dreamcast called Slave Zero. And that was a very different game. It was a game where you were playing a very large sort of mech character that towered over everything else in the city, and where you were taking out a lot of enemies. It kind of played like a third person shooter, but it was a little bit of a different mechanic. It garnered mixed opinion at the time and didn't sell very well, and there's never another entry in that series. Well, Ziggurat Interactive, who have been hoovering up some interesting old properties that could potentially get another lease on life, picked up the Slave Zero series. It was one of the last games developed by Accolade, who was back in the day a fairly well-known publisher and developer, just before they got swallowed up by that version of Infogrames and slash Atari and all that other jazz. And Ziggurat decided to commission a prequel to it in a totally different genre. So this plays like a brawler mixed with a fighting game is the best way to say it. It is a brawler at its core, but it uses a lot of fighting game style mechanics and timing. It's definitely not the button mashy kind of brawler that you would think of when you think of that genre. And that's both a good and a bad thing. So as you can see here, right away, the visual presentation is quite striking. It reminds me less of the Dreamcast and more of the PlayStation 1, but one of those PlayStation 1 games that was more of a 2D game. So you do have that sort of pixelated early 3D style background, but it doesn't have the PlayStation wobble, thank God. But all the foreground assets, including yourself and the various enemies that you're going to fight, as you can see, are all 2D. So it's kind of a neat mixture of things. And there were a lot of games in the PlayStation era, even if you're someone like me who thinks that PlayStation graphics weren't even that great at the time and have definitely not aged well. This was the kind of style of PlayStation game I could get into back in the day, where it did this sort of 2D 3D hybrid in a cool way, and that's what they've got here, which I do quite like. So it's a cool combination. There's a good amount of levels in this as well, and there is a story that is told through some in-game audio, like you're seeing right now or hearing right now, as well as some really nicely drawn cutscenes. Well, they're static cutscenes. They're kind of like motion comic cutscenes, but I think the art in this is actually quite striking and interesting. So the story in this game, in this series as a whole, is anime AF, is the only way I can put it. And as someone who has never been the biggest anime fan, to me, it makes absolutely no sense. I don't understand it. I'm sure it does have deeper themes to it in that if you can better interpret the type of storytelling that it's offering, but for me, I was just like, man, I don't know. I don't get it. Though I will say that the ending of this dovetails quite nicely into the beginning of Slave Zero. Honestly, if you finish this and then go play the original Slave Zero, which, by the way, you can buy the PC version on GOG, link in the description. Click that if you would. It helps me out. If you go from this straight into the original, it picks up almost exactly where this one ends, which I thought was kind of cool. I respect the fact that even though the story of this series as a whole, especially in the original, was fairly light and very few people played that original, they still had a commitment to it, and I appreciate that. I actually really do. So you're going to go through. So I've actually finished this, obviously, because I knew what the ending was. So there's a bunch of different levels in it. Now, that level that you just saw there was pretty quick because we're early on in the game. Some of the other levels are quite a bit longer. And you will die in this a lot because some of the encounters in this can get quite gnarly. And I'm going to talk about that and also show you that a little bit later on. And The levels do have checkpoints in them, but those only are maintained in your current session. So if you bail out of a level midway through, even if you've checkpointed to the point where, like, if you die, you don't have to start from the beginning, when you resume your save, you will have to start from the beginning again. Just be mindful of that. That's a bit more of an old school design decision that they did with this. And for the later levels in particular, that can be a little bit mean. So what you have in this is, like I said, this kind of feels like a brawler mixed with a fighting game. In these early levels, you can definitely just button mash your way through it. But later on, you're going to have to make use of combos and really pay attention to your crowd management and stuff. If you don't, you're going to get stomped on pretty quickly. And so you do have a few different combo moves. You have a light and heavy attack that you can use. So you do have a couple of different combo moves there, and you do have a jump move, which can do that. And in addition, I'm actually going to back out here because this is early enough in the game that all the core mechanics haven't been unlocked yet. Let's go this one. So what you will also unlock is the ability. So you'll have like an EX meter basically. And by using that, you have the ability to do specialized EX moves and combos to sort of chain moves together and juggle enemies around. You also have an ability that you saw me do just there, where you can kind of blast enemies back for crowd control. Again, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And so you have different abilities to do with that. You also can, if you have your meter filled up, which I'll show you here as soon as this thing gets these captions off the screen. When your meter is also full, you can also enter into a special mode that allows you to basically recharge your health through hitting enemies as long as the mode is active, and that can be quite handy. Though keeping your meter full, if you don't want to use heavy combo moves, can be tricky as well. So that's something that you have to be mindful of too. It's a system with a fair amount of depth to it that you're going to have to really work on managing here. I honestly here, just a minute, I don't know where the UI went. Okay, there. That draw HUD option, I can't explain why that got turned off. I did not do that, but okay. So anyway, now you're seeing the HUD. So as you can see there, it's got your health, and there is a combo system in this. The combos tick down really fast. So if you want to get a really, really high number, you got to be prepared to sprint around and juggle enemies really, really fast, because otherwise it's gonna tick down very quick. But you can see there your EX meter charging up under the health bar every time I hit somebody. When I use certain combo moves, it will tick down. If it gets filled up, I can use that sort of health recharging move I spoke of. There's more to this. There is a tutorial in this, though. Even though it's fairly long, some people have said that it's not, that they don't think it does a very good job at explaining everything, and I would tend to agree, honestly. So you see here, you can get a decent number of, you can get a decent combo meter built up. I don't think increasing your number of hits actually does anything except increase the number, and there is an achievement for getting a combo above a certain amount, so that's something to keep mindful of as well. And you also will have up to 4 different secondary weapons here that you can use. So I'm going to show you these without any enemies on the screen. So it's kind of, they're all throwables basically. So there's a quick grenade, an area of effect grenade. I'm actually out of the third one, but that is kind of a merving, like, multi-grenade, and then those sort of throwing knives like that. To recharge these items, you actually have to spend in-game money on them, which you can do either between levels, or in certain levels, shops will spawn mid-level. So what will happen is you're buying more ammo for your items that are tied to the next checkpoint. So what I mean by that is, say you start a level and you had full everything and you used a bunch of it and died before you hit a checkpoint. When you come back, you will have everything back. Everything that you started with, you will have when you come back. If you hit a checkpoint, you'll resume that checkpoint with whatever you had at that moment. So you have to be mindful of that if you want to make sure that you use everything there. Also, there's my sort of burst move that kicks enemies back. As you can see, it's that weird little mouth thing under the stamina meter. So the way the story in this works is you're kind of you actually are a human inside this crazy battle suit, and the battle suit is what the slave part is. And it's kind of like, this takes place 500 years in the future from now, and it's kind of like you're kind of like this interesting human machine hybrid type device. And the slave is sentient, like it does have its own oh yeah, sometimes in levels as well, you'll see these gold enemies that will run away. If you kill them, you get what's called a chronicle entry, which I don't think I can view. I think you have to go back to the main menu for those. They're little story unlockables, basically little collectibles, completely not necessary to finish the game. So yeah, so your slave is kind of like your suit, and you are working with the suit, but it has its own wants, needs, and agenda. And throughout the story, you'll be dealing with a sort of the conflict between the man and machine of it. It's a really interesting storytelling concept. I just feel that they try to do things with it. I just find it incredibly hard to follow personally. But this is very much a unique cyberpunk universe that's got some cool characters and offbeat storytelling to it, which I think a lot of people are going to like. So yeah, that's what you're dealing with from a story angle. And then what you have here is, so what you also have, I should say, is in addition to the shop where you can buy those consumables, you can buy upgrades. And these come from everything between health, how fast your EX meter charges, and to what your maximum level of each ordnance type is, things like that. What's interesting is that you can go back to previous levels and grind out money for upgrades if you want. There's also cosmetics in this, quite a few cosmetic skins actually, and it's weird because you unlock the different skins by beating levels, but you still have to buy them to equip them, and they're expensive. And when I say spend money, I mean in-game money. There's no microtransactions in this or anything like that. So you may have, if you really want to max out your character's upgrades and get a lot of skins, you are going to grind. So that's an odd choice. Personally, I would rather it just give you the skins when you unlock them through progression. Having to buy them separately, nah, I don't think that was really necessary. And as you can see there, at the end of a battle, the game will rate you. Now, I'm going to tell you, the rating system is impenetrable because the criteria to get higher level ratings is not the same in every level in every battle. It's definitely not, because I can play the same way in one level and I'll get S's, and then I'll play the same way in another level or even another battle, and even though I did really well and I got a high combo and I tried to mix up my variety and I didn't get hit very much, I'll get like an E, and I'll be like, but why? And it doesn't tell you that, which is, so it leaves it to you to figure out. Some people are going to like that, and getting high ranks on every level is not necessary. The game actually does have online leaderboards and a score system that it sort of tracks based on that, which I think is cool. That's something they really didn't have to bother with in a game like this, but they did. But you're kind of going to have to learn the way the game wants the combo system to work in every battle. Don't you run from me. There we go. I think I already killed that one. Yeah, I did. Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, sweet. The combo system, it's clear the game wants you to learn how it works in each level, and that's part of the challenge. I don't really like that idea. I think if you're going to design a system like that, it should be universal, but that's me. Not everyone is going to think the same way. And you can also see this guy here who kind of looks like a boss. No, he's not a boss. He's a mid-level enemy, and you're going to run into several of these over the course of the game. Sometimes not one-on-one, which makes things really interesting. And so there's a fair amount to this, right? And in many ways, it has a lot of the same systems you'd find in a good brawler, or even a third-person action game like a Devil May Cry or something like that, which is cool. And that's why I got so interested in this, because one, I always thought the Slave Zero universe was cool, and I was like, wow, someone's actually doing something with that, so let's check that out. And I like brawlers, and I mean, I've beaten the entire Devil May Cry series, and actually, I'm not 100% sure if I beat the third one or not, but I beat a lot of them anyway. And I like the idea of combining those mechanics into this universe. So we'll get back to that in a second. So here we go. So here's the shop. Here's the upgrades. Now I have a lot of money there, as you can see. 12 quite a bit actually, but you see I don't have all the upgrades yet, and you can see they're quite expensive. 66 grand is a lot of money. I got a lot of that because I beat the game. Like for beating the game, you're gonna have to grind a lot to get that much stuff. So you can buy the different upgrades here, as you can see, and you can also restock your munitions. Now the game is a little misleading here because you can do this here, but a lot of the times you'll get something like this near the end of a level. But in this case, you probably do want to do it because this usually, if it drops something like this, it often means a boss is around the corner. So that's something you want to be careful of as well. So as you can see here, here's all the different cosmetic unlocks I have. I don't think I've bought any of these yet. Okay, well, I just bought one by accident. So, sure. Let's do that. Oh. Kind of hoped I was going to get an achievement for that, but nope, totally didn't. Oh, well, that's fine. So yeah, usually if you see that mid-level, it means there's going to be a boss, but not always. And you always do have that ability to spend stuff after the level as well. So you'll have the ability to do that, but you'll want to make sure that if you're really good with combos and have your combat abilities in that upgraded a lot, you'll really only need the throwables in certain situations. Now, if I was playing this level for the first time and I wasn't as upgraded as I am, I would need them here without a doubt. This level is actually quite challenging when you're not fully upgraded. But even when you are fully upgraded, the end levels in this, oh Lord almighty. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute here, and I will show you a clip from one of the later levels. Not a story heavy bit. There is some dialogue there, so if that's kind of important to you from a spoiler perspective, I guess consider yourself warned. But yeah, you can get I'm going to show you an idea of where the game really started to get to me, and you are seeing kind of an example of it here, but it gets worse. In fact, you know what? Let's go do that right now. So you're going to see me glancing down a lot because there's a lot of issues that I personally had with the combat system in this game, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't forget any of them. So, okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over this, and I want to preface this by saying, while I have beaten all the Devil May Cry games and I've beaten a lot of hard brawlers and that, I am not a pro at this genre. I'm not. I play the Devil May Cry games on normal, and I don't S rank every encounter. I don't do, anything like that. A lot of you people listening to the complaints that I'm going to voice here are probably just going to say, well, get good, scrub. And you know what? You may be right. You may be. Being someone who has played these types of games a lot and is competent at them, I don't think I am wrong on that. I think there are some major problems with the combat system in this game, but you may disagree, and that's a particular reason I wanted to talk about this game, because I think the core underpinnings of this and the universe it's in is super cool, and I think that if you're someone who really is either way better at these games than I am out the gate, or is the type of person who likes to grind and grind and grind away at a game like this until you master it, I think you will like this. I mean, I'll also put it out there that I'm not the biggest fighting game fan. I just don't have time to get really good at any particular fighting game. While I love watching high-level fighting game play, I just don't play the genre very much because I just don't have the time to get that good at it. So I want to put all that out there so that when you hear my criticisms about this, you can decide for yourself if it's a me problem or something that's more fundamental to the game. And if you're not sure and you think the game looks cool, I strongly encourage you to try it for yourself and make up your own mind. So, okay, so let's talk about the problems that I have with this. And you haven't even seen nearly the worst of it yet, but so these are in no particular order, but there's quite a few of these. So I talked about the move that allows you to throw back certain enemies, right? Which you might think is crucial for crowd control, and it is. The problem is there are certain enemies, in particular high-level ones, that it just doesn't work on. So you'll use it, and certain enemies won't fly back. Or sometimes even regular enemies that it should work on won't fly back. It just won't work for no apparent reason. And that's a big problem for me, because things like that, if you want them to be a core part of the game system and something that you need to use, you need to be able to count on them. Their effects cannot be randomized. They need to do the same thing every time. And if they don't, we got a problem. So that's one thing. And as you can see here, when you're trying to deal with crowd control, generally your attacks will stun enemies, right? When you hit somebody, they'll go into a stun state, which allows you to, you know, balance that and potentially throw your attacks back and forth to do crowd control. Except it doesn't always work. Some enemies just do not get stunned at all. They're completely immune to it. And a lot of the time, especially like this character right here, that enemy you can't stun by hitting them. And you rarely fight those kinds of enemies one-on-one. As you can see right here, this gets absolutely mad. So in some of these levels, you're going to be dealing with obscene crowds like that. And, well, I used my stun move, and what happened? It knocked a bunch of the enemies back. It didn't knock all of them back. And the ones that it didn't knock back were still able to do damage to me. That's a big problem. You can juggle enemies in this, which is really, really good. If you can kick an enemy up off the ground, especially if you can pin them against the side of a level, you can juggle them. Except sometimes your hits randomly won't connect. They'll go through or they'll go through an enemy. You'll literally see it go right through someone, and you lose the juggle, and all of a sudden that battle strategy gets completely hosed up. There is a parry system in this. And even speaking as someone who is not good at parry systems, like I don't like parry systems because I'm terrible at most of them. I just don't have the frame perfect timing. But how do most parry systems work? You hit a button to counter an enemy hit when it's coming in, right? In this game, you don't hit a button. You have to hit the direction that you're facing the enemy in. In other words, if an enemy's attack is coming at you from the right side, you have to tap the right direction on the gamepad right as that enemy attack comes in. And sometimes you're going to be required to do that when dealing with massive crowd control like this. It's a clumsy idea that doesn't work. It's unreal. It's not that it doesn't work. It can work, but you cannot do it reliably and you can't count on it. If you could just hit a button to parry, it would be great, but you can't always do that. And you see right here how remember I talked about how enemies sometimes don't get stunned? Sometimes you don't get iframes either, or the game doesn't grant you iframes. So I got pinned into that corner. I was hitting all kinds of buttons to try to jump or slide or dodge or use my blowback move to get out of the way, and I couldn't because you're getting hit so constantly that you never get a chance to input anything. The game effectively pins you into a stun lock state where it will take you out, and no matter what you try to do. The first thing that happened when I ran into that is I was like, I used to collect Neo Geo stuff, and I'm like, wow, this feels exactly like a cheap SNK arcade fighting game, where sometimes the enemy will knock you down and literally will not let you get back up, and there's no way to counter out of it. That happens regularly in this game, and it drove me nuts, absolutely nuts, because if you can't stun certain enemies, but the enemies can perma stun lock you, that's not a question of get good. That's a question of the game not playing by its own rules. And I vehemently I have a very visceral reaction to games that teach you what the rules of combat are, and then, much like this, just randomly decide that we're not going to adhere to them. We're going to make you adhere to them, but we don't have to all of a sudden. That's just unfair, and I just really don't like that. You're not really seeing it as bad here, but in some levels, like you can see, you can get because you will always be behind enemy models. Sometimes you can't see where you are in a fight. In other levels, you'll have a large fight where big chunks of the environment are actually blocking the fight because foreground items in the environment take place in front of the fight. So you have to try to do crowd control when you literally can't see anything. The checkpoints in some levels seem almost randomly placed. Sometimes you'll play a level where you have like a checkpoint after every single fight, or some levels, not unlike this one actually, you'll do a very large fight that has several particularly hard enemies that you'll bash your head against for like 20 minutes to get past. You'll pass the battle. Sometimes it will even give you a rating to indicate that that sequence is completely over, and then you'll die and find out that you have to go back like 3 battles, and you have to do, in some cases, the vast majority of the level over again. A couple of times I had that, I almost quit the game and said, that's it, I'm done, I'm not coming back. that seems like a very easy problem to solve that they didn't for some reason. So yeah, talked about the iframe thing. You can also see, unlike a lot of brawlers, there's no enemy health meters. So that is obviously a conscious choice, and I think some people are going to say, yeah, I prefer it that way, and that's perfectly valid. But it makes crowd control very difficult, especially when you have mini boss characters like this show up. When you can't tell how hurt an enemy is, it's really difficult to be able to figure out, okay, so, and you see I'm getting hit from off screen there by that mini boss that is immune to my stun. So I'm basically locked into this corner. You have no idea how many times I had to do this battle over, and there's multiple phases to this battle. You have no idea how many times I had to do that battle over because of situations like that where I literally had no control over what was happening to me. And yeah, I personally think that enemy health meters should be an option you can turn on and off, because it makes it very hard to do crowd control when you don't know what the enemy health is, especially when some of these later battles also have essentially mini bosses mixed in with them. When you have no idea what to do, that gets really, really frustrating as well. Yeah, as I said, the grading system makes no sense. Doesn't really matter if you're just playing it for the story, but for later on, but if you're someone who likes to try to S rank every level, it's going to require unnecessarily long amounts of grinding to figure that out. Plus the grinding that you're going to need if you want to fully upgrade your character, which if you're not a god tier player, you're going to need if you want to beat this. The final boss in this game took me, I don't know how many tries and multiple hours to beat, and some of that was because I literally had to spend like 2 hours grinding old levels to get the remaining upgrades, and even then the boss was still super cheap. And literally the day before I started fighting that boss, a patch was put out that dropped his health by 15%, and he was still that difficult. So, you know, that's the thing. Again, that can be just down to challenge, and that's fine, but without going into any real spoiler territory, the final boss has the same problem that I've already spoken of, where the game decides arbitrarily that it doesn't have to play by the same rules that it imposes on you. So something like that. The biggest problem that I have is that you can play the same battle twice, pretty much the exact same way, but you'll get a different result each time. And that's the part that really bothers me. Games where you need to get good are games where, to me at least, again, are games where the encounters are always playing by the same rules. This is what people say when they talk about Souls games, for example. People will say that Souls games are very hard but very fair. The rules are always the same, though, and if you learn those rules and you learn the systems, you can get a guaranteed result every time. That's why there are people who are literally able to play Souls games with no armor or something like that, right? That's why naked runs are a thing, because the rules are so well established and so strictly universally enforced that you will be able to, if you learn those rules, you can basically just steamroll your way through the game. This doesn't feel like that to me. This feels like there is so much. I don't think it's RNG. I really don't think it's RNG, but the systems in this are just so random, and sometimes because of the way the game doesn't play by its own rules, and by the way you can get trapped sometimes and stun locked and, you know, have to deal with enemies that you can't see and things like that, it feels like you could go into the same battle. You could go into, if you were able to somehow go into the same battle and have the game do in like an almost tool-assisted fashion, input the exact same button presses at the exact same timing down to the millisecond, that you would get different results each time. And that introduces a level of randomness and entropy to the equation that all of a sudden makes the game feel like it's being unfair. And that's what really bugs me about this. I don't know if it actually is like that, but in the hours I spent with this, and I went way beyond the average time on how long to beat.com for finishing this. That's how it felt to me, is that there was too much of a time where it felt like I won an encounter, not because I was skilled, but because I was lucky more than anything else. And that if I'd come back with the same amount of skill and done the same thing, I would have got stomped. And that bugs me. The game is trying a really cool idea, which is trying to mash a brawler with a more precise, methodical combo-driven fighting game. I actually think that's a really cool idea. But it feels like the fighting engine that they're using here just isn't up to the task. It feels like the game is trying to write a check its tech can't cash, if that makes any sense. That's how it feels to me. And that's why I wanted to preface all that by saying that I am not qualified to be able to judge with a certainty that that's what's going on. I'm just not that good at this genre. I'm really not. And this could be all in my head, and it could just be the fact that I'm not patient enough, and that I'm not going to spoil it and explain what that target was that came up on the screen. There are 4 different bosses that you have to fight in this before the main one, all of whom have their own very unique traits and personalities and attack types. Let me just put it that way. So that's my main gripe with it, is just the fact that it too often feels like I tend to be a reasonably patient person. I have a pretty long temper, and I don't tend to get randomly mad at games. Like, I'm not one of those guys who generally with a game will smash my controller in frustration. I didn't break a controller playing this, but I hit this Xbox controller against the desk hard enough times playing this that the batteries popped out. That happened at least 3 or 4 times. I hit the desk hard enough with it once that my monitors, which are all on monitor mounts, all tilted down because of the like force that was on the desk. And multiple times my dog was looking at me, gave me kind of a look like, bro, you okay? When I was playing this. That kind of thing. It takes a lot for a game to frustrate me to that level, and that is what happened here. But I'll tell you this, I finished it. And games like that, you know, I generally pitch Indie Ramble as a first impression series more than a review series. I don't finish the vast majority of games I play for this series, and if a game makes me that annoyed, I will usually just put it down and say, no, I'm not coming back to this. It's not for me. But as infuriating as this game made me at times, it also made me go, yeah, well, you know what? Screw you. I'm not letting you beat me, and I'm gonna finish this thing. And I did. So maybe I think in a way that's a compliment. It infuriated me, but it made me want to play more of it. So there's something to put out there. So this was a long video, but I think it was important to put all that into context, because I don't want to because my experience with this game was what it was. I don't want to just crap on it and go, this is a bad game, it wasn't designed well, I don't think you should play it, because I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of cool ideas here and a really cool universe to boot. And I think people who are maybe better at this kind of game than I am probably would not only should play this, but they'll probably enjoy it. There's a lot of positive reviews for this on Steam. A lot of people are liking this. And when I did ask a question at one point about the system in this game in the Steam forums, a few people did tell me, yeah, if you were paying closer attention, you wouldn't have run into this problem. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But that said as well, if you're a person who looks at this and thinks that, because this game also, I don't believe it has, you know what, I'm going to check right now. I don't believe this game has difficulty options either. So I don't think you can make it easier. I think that was something people requested. Yeah, there's no difficulty options in this. So if you think this is too hard, you're stuck with it. That's something you're going to have to deal with as well. So, you may end up finding that this is not for you, because you may think it's too difficult. Some people are going to really not like the way this is, and some people I think are going to love it. And I hope by giving this deep dive into it and explaining what my problems were with it, but also prefacing them with the type of player I am, helps shed some context on that, and will help better inform you into deciding if this is the game for you, and if it's something that you want to try. Personally, I do, as impenetrable as the story is, I think the Slave Zero universe is actually really cool. And I'd like to see more games done in this environment. Frankly, I'd love to see a modern game done like the first one, with the actual crazy mech combat third-person shooter thing. That actually would interest me a lot more. But yeah, this is cool, and I think it's really cool that Ziggurat is doing this with some of these old IPs. They just decided, yeah, we own these old games that people haven't played in a long time. But we're going to try to make something that's cool for the people, for the niche fan base who does remember those old series, and that can hopefully get some new people into these ideas too. I love that. I think that's really cool. I'm really glad that Ziggurat is doing that, and I'm glad they chose to do it with Slave Zero. It's just maybe not the my ideal way, but it may be yours. So yeah, that is Slave Zero X. It is out now. Like I said, I know this was a long video, but I think it was really important to put all that into context so that people realize I don't necessarily think this is bad. I think it just has some faults that made it really frustrating for me, but those same things will not be faults to other people. So that's the important thing. So thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate it. If you like what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. That does help out a great deal. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think? Do you think, you know, have you played this? Do you think I'm just not good at it? Do you agree that there are some faults in the fighting system? Do you think, you know, does this interest you to try out? Are you a fan of those you know, third-person action games who thinks there's cool ideas here? I'd love to know about that as well. And you can also follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction. Streams are on hiatus as I record this, but they will be coming back eventually, focused on retro stuff, including what I call my deep backlog, which Slave Zero is in, by the way. You can also pick up the original DRM free on GOG.com. If you follow the link in the description, that would help me out too. And yeah, we have a great community, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you on the next Indie Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.